Spotlight is a production of CTNY, the Catholic Television Network of Youngstown. It seeks to spotlight people, places, and events from around the Diocese of Youngstown that promote the new gospel of joy called for by Pope Francis. Your program host is Father James Korda.
Hello and welcome to Spotlight. I'm Father Jim Korda. During this series, we are going to celebrate the 75th anniversary of the Diocese of Youngstown. And joining me in today's show is Sister Jerome Corcoran. Sister, it's a pleasure to have you on Spotlight.
It's a very great pleasure to be on Spotlight.
Now, during this 75th anniversary year, Sister, you have lots of memories. And that's why we want you to share as many memories as you can with us. Tell us when the diocese was first started back in 43. What were you doing back in 1943?
It was very interesting when I really hadn't heard that it had been formed. We were in summer school at Catholic U in Washington, and we were coming home after summer school, and we were in a coach of a train with the windows open and kind of soot coming in, and we had all this white linen, but we were accustomed to it, and we weren't unhappy. So there were about a half a dozen of us coming back from summer school. The train conductor came in and said, "Oh, is the bishop calling all his girls home?" And we said, "You mean what?" He said, "Youngstown is a diocese." And so that was how we found out.
Sure. Were you excited about that?
Oh,
was the community
yes.
excited about that?
There had been some talk, just kind of rumors, that part of the Diocese of Cleveland would be cut off, and it would be a diocese. We had heard that a few times, but it was a train conductor, and he was very happy about it.
Now, what's your earliest recollections of Bishop McFadden, the first bishop of the diocese, obviously coming from Cleveland? What do you remember about him?
What I remember about Bishop McFadden is a whole lot, because Ursuline High School at that time had a large house next door. It was the Chauncey Andrews estate. And convents were buying up those big mansions. They were so much cheaper than building. Sure. So the convent had bought that, and that was a convent. And about 20 of our younger sisters lived there. And at that time, I was in the younger group. So we lived there in the convent, and Bishop McFadden came in. And we saw him for the first time coming in the front door. And he had a couple people with him in bags and so forth. But he didn't pay any attention to the bags or even any attention to the beautiful house. He was so personable and interested. He won our hearts from the beginning. He really did. So Bishop McFadden had the first floor of the convent. And it was a beautiful mansion. And then we had the upper stories. And so Bishop McFadden had asked that he be our chaplain. So Bishop McFadden said our Mass every morning at 7. Reverent and pleasant and homey and holy and lovely every morning at 7. And I remember so many things about him, but I'm mentioning the Mass. So one of his characteristics was he wasn't a demanding person at all. The rumors they grew, how bright he was and what a scholar he was and all these things he had done, but he wasn't demanding at all. And none of us ever had him say, change this or do it that way or anything. And we really only saw him at Mass in the morning, and then we saw him after our dinner in the evening. And what that turned out to be, in our schedule, we have dinner in the evening, and then we usually have some recreation for a half hour or an hour then. And our schedules are different now, but half an hour or an hour of recreation. Now, we could go for a walk, or we could listen to music, or we could talk to one another. But at that time, we were in our 20s, in early 30s, and we were finishing off degrees. And so we were going, some of us were going to Sisters College in Cleveland. College was especially set up for sisters and of the diocese. And it was really nice. We'd get to know the professors, and they get to know us, and it was very nice and homey, and some really sharp professors there. So some of our sisters had gone to phys ed there, and some of the phys ed teachers loved dancing. So they taught dancing and dancing and dancing. And we were young and we loved to move. So we'd do some dancing after dinner too. And a lot of it would be folk dancing. And that's a lot of fun in groups. And Bishop McFadden would often come in from his apartment and say, "May I join you?" And he'd sit there and he'd be so interested and so appreciative and so charming. We just love to have him come to our recreation.
That's great. Well, he obviously was a man who also had tremendous organizational skills to get this diocese started,
yes.
Because you have to almost start from scratch.
Or worse.
Yes. Yes, and we've got just a few minutes left of our first segment, Sister. So in about 2 minutes, tell us about your involvement with the diocese, just briefly.
With him in particular?
Yes.
Okay. Very shortly after he came, I was told that I was the one selected to pack the bag that he would carry to confirmation. It would have every item that he would need for a confirmation ceremony. And the bag was kept in a certain place near his suite, and I would pack it during the day, and I would check it in the evening. And I felt so proud that I was packing Bishop McFadden's bag.
Well, Sister, we're going to talk about some more of your memories and recollections in a moment, but we're going to take a quick break. So please stay with us. We'll be right back. It was in Dungannon, Ohio, in Columbiana County, that the first group of Catholics settled. St. Philip Neri, the first parish in all northern Ohio, was founded in 1817 under the title of St. Paul's Settlement. It was to visit this settlement that Father Edward Fenwick, the Apostle of Ohio, made his first trip to northern Ohio. 4 years later, Cincinnati was chosen as a see city in the state of Ohio, and Fenwick was selected as the first bishop. Today, St. Philip Neri remains the oldest parish in the Diocese of Youngstown, but it is also one of the smallest. Congratulations, Catholic Diocese, for celebrating 75 years with pride in the past and faith in the future. Miles from the first Catholic parish in all of Ohio, in a place called Canton, Catholics gathered in 1817 to celebrate Mass with Father Fenwick. Because of limited building space, the Mass was held outdoors under a huge oak tree. The spot near the present Church of St. John the Baptist, which was established in 1823 as the second oldest parish in the Diocese of Youngstown. The oak tree grew there until 1906, when it was struck by lightning. To preserve it, the parishioners took the wood and carved a chair out of it, which remains in the church today. In 2012, St. John the Baptist was elevated to a basilica. Congratulations, Catholic Diocese, for celebrating 75 years with pride in the past and faith in the future. Welcome back to Spotlight. I'm talking with Sister Jerome Corcoran, who is an Ursuline sister. And Sister, I loved your memories of Bishop McFadden. Tell us now about some of the other priests or bishops or people that were influential that you remember as our diocese was being formed.
One person who was very influential, the McFaddens were members of Holy Name Parish in Cleveland. The Gallaghers were members of Holy Name Parish. And the Gallaghers and the McFaddens were very close friends. One of the very first things Bishop McFadden did when he came to Youngstown, he saw that Ursuline High School at that moment needed a principal. And he thought, Father Joe Gallagher was ordained several years ago. He has some experience. He's a scholar, and he's a lot of fun. And I'll just ask the Gallagher family to talk him into doing it, because Father Joe Gallagher was on his way to be a Navy chaplain. He had made, but family friends. So Father Joe Gallagher said, I'll be glad to be principal of Ursuline High School. Father Joe Gallagher had red hair, and he was a bright guy and an interesting guy, and he involved people right away. So when Father Joe Gallagher came to be principal, here was another aspect of Bishop McFadden. It is so important for us to know that families are the church. And here we have two long-standing families, friends from Cleveland, and Father Joe Gallagher comes to be principal, and they were the best friends. They enjoyed each other, and it was like a father-son relationship. Now, Father Joe Gallagher was bright and decisive, and he did what he needed. And Bishop McFadden made sure, one of his first things, made sure that the Ursuline High School had expanded, had adapted, had furnished, equipped, and reconstructed. He made sure all those things were up to date, and they were. It was a good school. I went there. Okay, so Father Gallagher became principal, and he was in the halls every day. He was in the classrooms every day. He knew every child by name, and he was quick. He had a little bit of a temper, not disagreeable, but a little bit. It would show up if he told someone twice to do something. That wasn't a good thing. So the two of them, Father Joe Gallagher, after Father Joe Gallagher said, yes, I'll come, then Bishop McFadden had the whole first floor of this large mansion, and Father Gallagher's suite was cut off this part, and Bishop McFadden had this part. So it was great to see them of an evening or going out or going to church, and such nice, friendly, bright, humorous, personable people.
Wonderful.
So Father Joe Gallagher was a great influence on everybody who went through the school at that time.
Sure. Now, Sister, you obviously remember, since you were very close to Bishop McFadden, were saddened when he passed away. So tell us about that experience.
Oh, that experience, yes. We really, even though I taught at Ursuline High School at the time, but even the sisters who weren't teaching there and were living in the house just enjoyed them both so much. And with Father Gallagher, it was done. I thought of it, it was done. And that was it. No muss, no fuss. And he had a very nice way of getting his three sisters in Cleveland, Father Joe Gallagher. He had three sisters in Cleveland, and lovely, lovely people. One was a librarian and so forth. And when our sisters would go to summer school, Father Joe Gallagher will tell the instructors, now remember, they've worked hard all year, and remember, take it easy. So Father Joe Gallagher just endeared himself right away to everybody. And the way arrangement was at that time, Bishop McFadden was our chaplain, and he said Mass for us about 7 o'clock every morning. Well, Father Joe Gallagher would drive down to Rayan Avenue, 5 or 6 blocks, and he would say their Mass also in the morning. And one morning, Father Joe Gallagher was driving as usual, and no one saw the accident, but Father Joe Gallagher's car, as it turned into Rayan Avenue, was hit by a car coming from the west. And the accident was so severe, he was dead on the spot. And the sisters in the little wooden chapel, that was the Rayan chapel at the time, heard the impact. And they thought, was it? Sure. And it was. Now, at that very time, our Mass was over, and we were having breakfast, and there was a telephone right in the hallway. Bishop, we didn't know about the accident, and it just happened. A sister came to Bishop McFadden in his breakfast room, and the phone was in the hall, and Bishop McFadden picked up the phone, and we couldn't hear the other side. But Bishop McFadden said, oh my, oh my, oh my. And
that was that.
And Bishop Joe Gallagher, Father Joe Gallagher, was shown in state in the Chancey on Andrew's home. There was a large receiving area, and there would be for wealthy people. And he was shown in state there. And the lines and lines and lines of people came. From Cleveland, of course, because he was so close to Cleveland. And both the Gallaghers and the McFaddens came. And lines of people. He had endeared himself to so many. And he was so funny.
Well, Sister, we're going to talk more about that in a moment. We're going to take another break, and please stay with us. We'll be right back. The first Catholic parish established in Portage County in 1831 near Randolph-Suffield was St. Joseph Church. Years later, John Newman, who would become the first American male to be canonized, was sent there to give a mission to help heal the divisions that occurred between the German Catholics who had settled there. Perhaps that is what made him a saint. The parish is also noted for its school, which dates back to 1832, being the oldest English-speaking school west of the Alleghenies. The church is also famous for its Lourdes Shrine, which has welcomed pilgrims since 1927 and is the only exact replica of the world-famous grotto at Lourdes in France. Congratulations, Catholic Diocese, for celebrating 75 years with pride in the past and faith in the future. Welcome back to our show. I'm talking with Sister Jerome Corcoran, the Ursuline Sisters. And Sister, I love the stories that you tell, even if they're so sad sometimes, but they're from your heart. I think now I'd like you to share with us some of your recollections of our second bishop, Bishop Walsh, and also St. Columba Cathedral. Is it possible to do both?
Oh, yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
Whichever one you want to do first.
Let's see. The cathedral burned. Bishop Walsh became less than healthy, but he was very good at all his duties, Bishop McFadden. And he went to work every day and took care of the routines, made sure everything was up to date. And he had some health problems, as people would have, of course. And so Bishop Walsh was brought in because it seems to me that the impression was Bishop McFadden was sicker than he was. That's the impression we got. And when Bishop Walsh came from the South to be the Bishop of Youngstown, it was not to be auxiliary bishop, it was to be the ordinary of Youngstown. We felt that, and Bishop Walsh even expressed that he thought he was sicker than that. He was taken back. But Bishop McFadden was such a giving, caring, generous person. They shared duties for a while, and then when Bishop Walsh McFadden died in a few years, Bishop Walsh took over, and Bishop Malone later became the associate auxiliary bishop. Now, Bishop Walsh and Bishop Malone worked together very closely in the chancery there, and I was still the director of education, and so I was impressed with some of the things we did. We'd never dare do them today because of unions. They wouldn't let us. But Bishop Malone and I were really interested in the teachers learning all the new things that would be helpful and meeting one another and encouraging the children and getting a lot of vibrancy into the system. And so we actually had, on Saturdays, we would have workshops that would be almost all day, not extra pay. They would come. We would have demonstration lessons. How do you teach, like the math that is changing? And how do you encourage parents to be part of what you're doing? And how do you value children more, really respect and love them so that they feel they can succeed, and they will. So we had like a little trip of it. We would go to Canton for one presentation, and we would get all the staff there from the schools in Canton, and we do our little song and dance, and we would always have a couple specialists that the teachers would like to hear, very engaging people, and we did it on Saturdays and evenings. At no extra pay, but in those days the staff was attuned to that, and so we did that, and that I felt was very productive, and it also brought Canton and Youngstown together because they were so separated.
Yes, and probably even more so nowadays. I think with mobility, not as much, but there's always been that kind of like unfortunate divide. And that happens in dioceses.
Oh, sure.
It's interesting. My first assignment was in Canton, and I was there for 6 years, had 6 wonderful years. I was there with Father Dave Rhodes. He went there. That was his first pastorate, my first assignment, and so that was a great experience. I still have friends in the Canton area that I am very close with today.
You would.
So Stark County has certainly a place in my heart. Let's go now in our last few minutes, Sister, to talk about the cathedral. You remember when the cathedral was beautiful, and then when it was struck by thunder and lightning and it burned.
Now, the cathedral was my home parish. So I went to St. Columba's School, and every Friday morning we went to Mass, and the whole school body was there. And every Thursday afternoon we went over and practiced to sing for Sunday, and we had a lot of togetherness, and wonderful teachers, just wonderful teachers. I still remember some of the poetry I learned in grade school. So St. Columba Church was a beautiful, beautiful Romanesque style, and it couldn't be prettier. And in those days, the churches were open all day, every day. People would come in to make a visit, or they just call the priest up, "Could you hear my confession?" And so the church was built in 1904, exquisite marble from Rome, and the best of everything. And the fire, it was lightning that hit the towers, and our convent was just across the street, Rayen and Elm, and this is wood and elm. And first we got the alarm that the cathedral, or not the cathedral, the church was on fire, and so we just went to the windows, and you would see the fire go up the turrets, and one would fall.
Oh my.
And it would take another one, and it would go up. And it would fall. And the noise of the fire engines, and after several had fallen, our attitude was like, it's probably all going to be gone. And so it was. But there were some things saved from the fire. One was the Last Supper, about that wide, about 60 inches wide. It was under the main altar, in front of the main altar in St. Columba Church. That was unharmed with all this desecration. And so our then superior, Mother, well, that was 1954, but a fellow who did artwork, Bertolini, saw this masterpiece, so he took it to his studio. Then in 1960, when Mother Edna Marie was elected superior, and she did marvels for our community, she went to Bertolini and said, "Now, that Last Supper, our sisters used to scrub that with a little brush to keep it clean when they did the sacristies. I think the place for that is in our new convent." Bertolini said, "Okay." So if you ever go out there, you can see that beautiful thing. Yeah. And so the old church had burned.
Yes.
Just so sad.
Well, Sister, we're unfortunately at the end of our time together. We thank you so much for being with us, and God bless you in your life, in your vocation, your ministry, and God bless to the Ursuline Sisters.
And God bless you, Father Korda,
thank
and
you.
CTNY.
Thank you.
You do wonderful work.
Thank you. And thank you for being with us. Have a good day, and God be with you.
Spotlight has been a production of CTNY, the Catholic Television Network of Youngstown. Your program host was Father James Korda.